David Trimble says don't write off the peace process yet. He says the IRA could start decommissioning even at this late stage. After the sword attack, the injured MP speaks publicly for the first time. And after 2 weeks of hype, a 4-minute fight. Good evening. Northern Ireland's First Minister David Trimble says there's still time for the IRA to show they're committed to peace and democracy. He insisted decommissioning could still happen and that the peace process shouldn't be written off prematurely. Earlier, the Sinn Féin president, Gerry Adams, said he thought decommissioning could be achieved, but he couldn't deliver it on unionist terms.
It was a day for the main players to do the rounds of the studios. The Ulster Unionist leader came to the BBC, appearing relaxed and striking a positive note. There was still time for decommissioning. What's the minimum that the Ulster Unionist Party needs from General de Chastelin's report?
What should have happened in June of 1998, in accordance with the agreement, decommissioning should have begun then. It has not yet begun. It is time for it to begin and to move beyond the initial procedural steps, which ought not to take more than a day or two, to actually carrying it out.
It seems to me that for the Ulster Unionist Party, this isn't just a point of principle, it's a point of morality as well. There's really no moral defence for the paramilitaries to hold on to their weaponry.
It's a matter of political principle, it's a matter of moral principle, it's a matter of practical reality. No matter what way you look at it, this has to happen. I'm sure it will happen, but some people are very slow to get the message.
The Sinn Féin president said that unionists shouldn't play hardball with the IRA over the decommissioning issue.
You see, all of us have to give each other space. I understand why the unionists want decommissioning now. It just is not within my grasp to deliver it on their terms, and nor is it my responsibility. I accept the obligation of decommissioning. Don't get me wrong, there's genuine need to get decommissioning done.
The deputy leader of the nationalist SDLP was asked if the IRA had any excuse for not decommissioning.
No excuse whatsoever, ever. And more importantly, no reason. The reality is that in the Mitchell Review there was a clear understanding that the Ulster Unionists would help to set up the institutions, work the agreement. Those institutions are now up and working. Clear understanding was that the IRA would reciprocate.
All this has been the parties setting out their positions ahead of the decommissioning body's report. And on that hangs whether the devolved government continues, is suspended or even collapses under the resignation of the unionist ministers. Dennis Murray, BBC News, Belfast.
The Liberal Democrat MP seriously injured in a sword attack on Friday has spoken publicly for the first time about the ordeal. Nigel Jones, whose colleague Andrew Pennington died in the attack, said that MPs should be given their own bodyguards. A 49-year-old man, Robert Ashman, is due to appear in court in Cheltenham tomorrow, charged with murder and attempted murder.
Liberal Democrat leader Charles Kennedy arrived this afternoon referring to the terrible circumstances that brought him to the hospital bedside of his colleague. The MP, Nigel Jones, was facing the public for the first time since a man brandishing a sword cut down his best friend at the party offices in Cheltenham on Friday. Mr Jones was also injured in the attack and has needed surgery to both his hands.
A lot of these injuries that you see are superficial. Some of them have been sewn up. They're telling me this hand will take 6 weeks, and the ring finger of this hand may take a little longer to recover and may not be entirely 100%.
He also paid tribute to party worker and local councillor Andrew Pennington, who died from his wounds.
He was a giant. He was gave the whole of his adult life to serving others, and he's a very sad loss.
Afterwards, Mr Kennedy raised the question that has been vexing politicians on all sides.
We don't want to turn ourselves into hermetically sealed glass cases where you can't have that degree of contact. And at a time when Westminster is not unfairly in many cases criticised for being out of touch, one of the things that keeps all MPs, all parties, all parts of the country in touch is the importance of the local constituency surgery.
Last night, police charged 49-year-old Robert Ashman with attempting to murder Mr Jones and the murder of Mr Pennington. It's understood he'd been in regular contact with Mr. Jones, who was trying to help him resolve a long-running legal dispute. He'll appear before magistrates tomorrow. Meanwhile, the town of Cheltenham is slowly returning to normal. Throughout the weekend, floral tributes have been laid at the party offices, still closed and sealed tonight. And for Andrew Pennington, 3 books of condolence have been set up in and around the town, where people can pay their respects to a man who dedicated his life to his community. Jane O'Brien, BBC News, Cheltenham.
The president of the European Central Bank, Wim Dijsselbloem, has said it could be years before Britain is in a position to join the single currency. His comments have been echoed by the international financier George Soros, who's attending the World Economic Forum at Davos in Switzerland.
The president of the European Central Bank's responsible for the running of the single currency. Now Wim Dijsselbloem has chosen to remind Britain that any decision about future membership isn't just a matter for the government. From the bank's Frankfurt skyscraper, he's signalling that Britain is still a long way from fulfilling the strict conditions for taking part. Its economy isn't compatible with the rest of the EU. He told the BBC that until it's able to share the same economic policies, it can't join.
If ever the UK were to decide to join, you are talking about a moment in time which is years from today.
So you do think it will be several years anyway?
Well, it has to be.
The timetable predicated on the economic conditions.
Speaking to the World Economic Forum in Davos last Friday, the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, said he still wanted, in principle, to join the euro. But Britain's economy requires interest rates to control inflation, which are almost twice as high as those needed for countries in the Eurozone. Sharing the same rate as part of the single currency isn't an option.
That's where we have
And in Davos today, the influential financier George Soros was blunt. The economic gap between Britain and mainland Europe isn't narrowing, it's widening.
In order for Britain to join the euro, there has to be convergence. And right now, you actually have divergence.
At the talks in this Swiss resort, there's an acceptance that Britain's economy won't be in sync with its EU partners for quite a time. The European Central Bank is emphasising that joining the single currency isn't just a political decision. It's a matter of economics as well. Any British referendum lies a long way into the future. Jonathan Charles, BBC News, Davos.
You can see more of that report on the Money programme tonight at 7:30 on BBC Two. The telecommunications group Vodafone has announced plans to set up a major new Europe-wide internet company. The deal is a joint venture with the French group Vivendi. It'll only go ahead if Vodafone secures its takeover of the German company Mannesmann. Russia says it's making progress in the battle for Chechnya's capital, Grozny. It claims 70 Chechen fighters in the city have surrendered, although the Chechen rebels have denied this. Russia has failed to take control of Grozny despite months of fighting. But in Moscow, there's growing belief that victory is near. From there, Peter Biles reports.
In the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour in Moscow, a ceremony today to honour those who've served the motherland with distinction. Among them, top commanders involved in Russia's war in Chechnya. The military men believe they have reason to celebrate. Russian troops, they say, are finally breaking the Chechens' resistance. The proof, says this general, is that even the most radical and fanatical rebel commanders have begun laying down their arms. Moscow claims that dozens of Chechen fighters have surrendered this weekend. This is said to be one group which left Grozny. But Chechen leaders say it's merely Russian propaganda, and observers doubt whether it's a real turning point in the war.
The Chechen forces consist of two types of people. Some of them are professionals, the people who would fight until the last, and the other people who were forced into the fighting. So those who were forced, especially in the area of Grozny, they don't want to continue. They want to leave, which is logical.
The Russians may have Grozny in their sights, but the battle for control of the Chechen capital is still ferocious, as well as slow and costly. There's little sign here that a breakthrough is imminent. Russia continues to maintain that its military offensive in Chechnya has entered the final phase. But all the indications are that that's something based on wishful thinking rather than genuine optimism. Peter Biles, BBC News, Moscow.
Now, with news of the aftermath from Mike Tyson's victory and the rest of the day's sport, here's Rob Bonnet.
Well, Mike Tyson's already on his way home across the Atlantic after his predictably one-sided contest in Manchester last night against Julius Francis. Tyson took just over 4 minutes to demolish the challenge of the British heavyweight champion, and his manager said this evening that Tyson could fight again in Britain later this year.
For Julius Francis, the entrance was much grander than the finale. It was much longer as well, as he was accompanied into the ring by soldiers from the army base where he trained. As everyone expected, Mike Tyson in Manchester was a show rather than a serious boxing contest. But it was a job that had to be done if Tyson is ever to get another shot at the world title. Julius Francis, a journeyman professional, was out of his class, and Tyson's speed and power put him on the canvas twice in the opening round. But Francis achieved an ambition by making it to round 2. There was no let-up from Tyson, and ferocious punches to body and head forced Francis down twice more in the second round. His few minutes of fame were running out fast, and after the 5th knockdown, the referee called a halt. It proved nothing, except that Tyson can sweep aside a no-hoper. But how would he shape up against the current champion, Lennox Lewis?
Right now, I wouldn't do as well as I want to do, but in a couple of fights, I'll be victorious.
So is that a fight you would want to happen?
Excuse me?
Is that a fight that you would want to happen, you against Lennox Lewis?
And eventually, yes.
Francis said he was disappointed not to have lasted longer, but he had tried.
Boxing is a tough game anyway. And no matter what you do inside the ring, it's going to be pain involved, you know. I trained for a tough fight. I knew it was going to be a tough fight.
The pain was eased by a share of a £5.5 million purse for 243 seconds work, but some fans felt shortchanged.
We've all paid good money to watch Francis and Tyson there. It's been absolutely terrible.
It's a disgrace. Disgrace.
Disgrace.
You don't feel like you've had a valuable...
No, I don't think I have, no.
I've never been to a boxing match before and I thought it was brilliant, even though it was 3 minutes.
Mike Tyson checked out of his hotel early this morning to return to the States. The promoter, Frank Warren, says he'd like to get him back to box in Britain again. But a contest between Tyson and Lennox Lewis still looks a long way off. Neil Bennett, BBC News in Manchester.
Aston Villa were the winners of an exciting 5th round FA Cup tie against Leeds United this afternoon. They came from behind twice at Villa Park to win 3-2, all their goals coming from their Italian striker Benito Carboni. Meanwhile, Chelsea are playing Leicester City at Stamford Bridge. The latest score, 2-0 to Chelsea.
Aston Villa had gone 4 hours without scoring before today. Hardly a surprise then that Villa Park was once again well below capacity. And the fans who stayed away must have thought it was the right decision when Leeds United went ahead inside the first 15 minutes. Ian Hart scoring his 7th goal of the season. Out of nowhere, Villa created an equaliser from their first chance of the game. Benito Carboni finishing off a superb move with his first goal for 7 weeks. Shortly before half-time, Leeds restored their lead courtesy of this stunning header from Eric Bakker. But Villa were a different side after the interval. Carboni again scoring the equaliser with one of the goals of the season. It was a spectacular strike which left goalkeeper Nigel Martin hopelessly out of position. With 20 minutes to go, an outstanding piece of skill from Paul Merson set up Carboni for his hat-trick and gave Villa what proved to be a winning lead. In creating the goal, Merson was left with his face streaming with blood after a clash of heads, but he has the consolation of a place in the quarter-finals to look forward to. In the day's other FA Cup fixture, Chelsea went ahead against Leicester City at Stamford Bridge with a goal from Gustavo Poyet, and a short time ago, George Weah increased Chelsea's lead. Paul Newman, BBC News.
The quarter-final draw has already been made, with the winners of Chelsea v Leicester at home to 2nd Division Gillingham. Everton will play Aston Villa and Bolton meet Charlton, while Tranmere will play either Blackburn or Newcastle. They meet tomorrow. England's cricketers have returned to form with victory over Zimbabwe in the latest match of the triangular one-day tournament in South Africa. Mark Elam set a new world record by dismissing 5 Zimbabwean batsmen, all leg before wicket, as England restricted them to 161 for 9. There was no repeat of Friday's batting collapse as England wrapped up victory by 8 wickets. Nick Knight finished unbeaten on 72. And Andre Agassi has won the Australian Open tennis title for the 2nd time. The top seed beat the defending champion Evgeny Kafelnikov of Russia by 3 sets to 1. Agassi now holds 3 of the 4 Grand Slam titles. And that's the sport. Fiona.
Thanks, Rob. Britain's former Olympic figure skating champion has taken his final bow. Robin Cousins, who won the Olympic gold medal 20 years ago, chose his hometown of Brighton for his last public performance.
This is Robin Cousins' last public performance. There'll be no comebacks, he says. But even after more than 30 years at the top, he proved today he can still impress. The Bristol-born star began skating at 5 and had won a place in the British international team by the time he was 15.
Whoa.
He established his technical and artistic reputation with breathtaking triple jumps, fast spins and captivating choreography. By 1980, he'd reached the very top, winning the European Championships and grabbing the gold for Britain at the Olympics with 5 triple jumps, never before seen on the competition circuit. Robin retired from competitive skating several years ago, but continued to entertain audiences all over the world in skating shows like today's Holiday on Ice. Now, even that's at an end. Robin, who's 42, says he wants to go out on a high, not on a stretcher.
There isn't a day really where I can get on the ice without having to go to see the physiotherapist and the doctor first. So I've been lucky with 5 knee surgeries that I've survived, and various bones and muscles and things, and to still then to be able to come and do sort of 10 shows a week, and as we did 3 shows yesterday, 2 today, you know, it is very demanding, and if you can't deliver what you think people should see, then you shouldn't do it.
But this isn't the end for Robin Cousins. He's got a packed schedule, continuing his BBC commentary work and producing and choreographing his own ice shows. Robin Cousins began his professional career in this show, and he now lives here in Brighton, so he says this is the ideal place to stage his swan song. But he won't be hanging up his skates just yet. He says he'll still be taking to the ice, he just doesn't feel the need to do it in front of an audience anymore. Linda Duffin, BBC News in Brighton.
And that's the BBC News for now. I'll be back with the next news at 5 to 10. Good evening.